Power cards play a huge part in WWE 2K22's MyGM mode. They can allow you to ruin opponent shows, heal your own superstars, and even boost your match ratings. So it's fair to say they're pretty important. So how hard would it be to win without them? Well, if you've been losing sleep over that question recently, then you're in luck, as in this video I'm going to try and do just that. So the rules are that at no point during the run can I use any power card. Pretty simple. Even if it's one I've been given for free, all of them are off limits. So with that out of the way, let's dive straight into the video. Just to quickly interrupt, we need your help. We actually have a second channel called DiamondLobby Reviews where we review gaming accessories and even sometimes games themselves too. We're currently at 830 subscribers at the time of recording this, and we need to hit 1,000 subs so that YouTube can start giving us some money towards all the accessories we buy. There's a link in the description below. If you could click that and subscribe, that would be amazing. You don't have to turn notifications on or anything like that, just simply subscribing is more than enough. The more support our channels get, the better our videos can become, so thank you all in advance, and let's get on with the challenge. Right, so let's get into the no power card run. I'm going to use Sonya Deville because her power card isn't particularly appealing. It's not too bad, and it has had a big buff since the update, but obviously I want to go with someone whose power card isn't amazing, so I don't feel like I'm missing out. Now in terms of brands, I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to go with Raw because NXT and SmackDown would just be way too tempting, and I kind of want to save NXT UK for my opponents. In the session settings, I'm going to try and do them as dirty as I possibly can and give them Shane McMahon and NXT UK, and then of course go over to hard for the difficulty and keep it at 15 weeks for the duration. So for the draft, I need to be extremely careful because I need a lot more superstars than usual, so stamina is going to be the main thing that I'm looking at here. I don't usually sign specialists, but Becky Lynch has 90 stamina, so I think I'm going to go ahead and make her my first signing. That does give us a bit of freedom though, because Becky Lynch can now theoretically go against any heel class type and defend her title. And I think seeing as I've already got one specialist in Becky Lynch, I'm going to go ahead and sign Bayley because she also has 89 stamina, and if she wins the title off Becky, or if Becky retains the title, then it'll be nice having a specialist to fight anyone who comes to contend next. Now for the men's main event stars, I'm going to go with Finn Balor because he's the only heel fighter in the top 9, and we've got John Cena and Drew McIntyre who are both face bruisers that we can choose from. So seeing as we have a free choice, Drew McIntyre has both 1 better stamina and 3 better popularity, so he is the obvious choice here. Also, I've just seen that Drew McIntyre has 4 star power and John Cena only has 3, which doesn't really make a ton of sense seeing as John Cena is the poster boy for WWE, but we'll go with it. So my thinking for the tag team is to have a face and heel bruiser and then a face and heel fighter, so when they're done with their little feud, I can put them into a match with either Drew or Finn for the title. And the first option is pretty clear, Dexter Lumis with 85 stamina. He is looking pretty good and he's only 150k, so that's a bargain. So I've just looked down the list and there's not many face bruisers for a decent price, so Eric is going to have to do, even though he only has 55 stamina. We've just got to hope that it doesn't affect us too much. So for the heel tag team, I'm going to go for Otis because he has a decent amount of stamina, and there's a couple of other bruiser heel options, but he is by far the cheapest. Then his partner is going to be Roderick Strong because he has good stamina and a decent price, and he's obviously a heel fighter. So I'm going to pick up one more male rivalry, and I'm going to make it a cruiser giant dynamic just to mix up the show variety, and Joaquin Wilde looks like a brilliant choice. Now there aren't many great choices for the face giant, but we're going to pick up Ivar because he has a decent amount of popularity and obviously he matches with Wilde. Now seeing as both my main event stars for the female division are specialists, I can pretty much choose whatever class types I want for the tag team, and I'm going to go for the classic Shotzi and Raquel Gonzalez, Cruiser and Giant versus Cruiser and Giant dynamic. Now it's quite an expensive purchase, but seeing as Nia Jax is the only face giant left on the list, I'm going to have to go ahead and pick her up. Then for our last pick, seeing as we actually have a fair bit more cash than I thought we would at this stage, I'm going to pick up Io Shirai as she matches perfectly with Nia Jax and completes a pretty good tag team, so hopefully they can hold the belts for a little while and become very, very popular and put on some great matches. Now at this stage I usually would advance and go and sign jobbers, but actually seeing as I have enough cash for another superstar, I may as well buy one from here because they actually have a permanent contract rather than only having 5-10 weeks, that kind of thing. So I don't know who I'm going to go for yet, but I'll come back when I've made a decision. So I've had a look at the list and I've gone with Tegan Knox as she has great stamina and okay popularity. Obviously it's not ideal, but it's not really the end of the world. So hopefully we can sign her and then find a face bruiser in the jobbers section when we load into the game. So I'm just going to do what I usually do and give the belts to the two most popular superstars in each division. Now I've just loaded into the game and Dana Brooke has popped up in the free agent slot, and that's actually not a bad acquisition. Unfortunately, she's only 5 weeks, but then again, we only have 47,800, so this fits our budget perfectly. So for week number 1, we've got all 4 titles on the line in a desperate plea to try and get ahead early on. I don't really think it's going to work due to the increased difficulty of hard AI, but we've got the women's title in the opening match, then we've got the male's title in the main event, and then we've got the mid-card being both of the tag team titles on the line, so we can try and get that plus 10 popularity to those superstars. Then as you can see in the promo slots, I'm begging for money through advertising because I can't actually afford to do anything else. So let's advance and hope that this show gives us an early lead. Match number 1, and Bayley's already won the title off Becky in a 3-star match, so that's a pretty good start to the show. The first mid-card match for the women's tag team titles is only a 2-star, so very disappointing, but Raquel and Shotzi actually win, which is a bit of an upset in my opinion, but then again, that makes for a better rivalry going forwards. Thankfully, match number 3 gets a 2.5 star as Otis and Strong take out Eric and Loomis for the titles. The main event sees Drew lose his title to Finn in a 3-star match, so not the best rating, but certainly not too bad, but it doesn't start a rivalry, which is very, very frustrating. So despite having all 4 titles on the line, we do go into week 2 about 2,000 fans down, which obviously isn't that bad at this stage, but it doesn't set a great precedent for the rest of the run. So going into week 2, I want to give some of my stars as much of a rest as possible, so I'm using my extra 2 rivalries in the mid-card. Other than that, Otis and Roderick Strong versus Dexter Loomis and Eric had the highest stamina out of the 2 tag teams, so we've put them in a tag team title match in the opening fight. Then seeing as Becky and Bayley both had insanely high stamina at the start of the game, I've thrown them into the main event again for the title. Then I'm going to try and force the rivalry between Finn and Drew with a call out and then do 2 charity promos just to try and get some fans. So that's how week 2 looks. Let's get into it and hope that it's a hell of a lot better than week 1. The opening match actually sees the titles change hands as Eric and Loomis win them off of Roderick Strong and Otis in a 2.5 star match again, so not ideal, but it has gone up to a level 2 rivalry, so hopefully that one starts to get better sooner. Finn delivers a good call-out promo which starts a rivalry with Drew, so at least that's off the mark. The first mid-card match between Dana and Tegan gets a 2-star, which is kind of expected, but their rivalry does start, which is nice to see. Unfortunately, we can't say the same for the second mid-card fight as Ivar vs Wilde only gets a 1.5 star, and no rivalry started, so what is the point in any of this? Bayley retains her title in the main event against Becky in another 3-star match, so it's not too bad, and the rivalry grows to level 2, so I guess we'll take it. So as you can see, after week 2, we're only 2,000 fans down still, so I'm going to try and increase the show quality now to catch up to Shane. So as you can see, heading into week 3, we've definitely upped the ante in terms of show quality, with the main event being Finn versus Drew in an Extreme Rules match for the title, and then the opener being a tables tag team match for the women's titles. I actually had Ivar and Wilde as the first mid-card match, but I've just changed it to Dana Brooke and Tegan Knox, as the callouts tend to work better when starting rivalries, so I've tried to get Ivar to start one with Wilde. Then the second mid-card match is just a tag team match, not for the titles, I just want to increase the rivalry, so hopefully that's okay. We'll get into the show and see if it's any better. The opening match kicks things off pretty well with Shirai and Jax taking the win over Gonzalez and Shotzi, and a 3.5 star, so that's pretty refreshing. Dana and Tegan have another 2-star match, but I kind of expected this seeing as both of their star powers are quite low, and their popularity isn't very high either. And I think I did actually book Dana and Tegan both in advertising promos in the first week, which lower your popularity as well, so they don't really stand much of a chance. So only a 2-star match for them, but it's not the end of the world. Their rivalry's level 2, let's hope that it grows. Loomis and Eric take the win in the second mid-card match, and it's actually a 2.5 star, and the rivalry's up to level 3, so that's looking pretty promising. And the main event has Drew win his title back over Finn in an Extreme Rules match, and it's a 4-star rating, but unfortunately the rivalry hasn't progressed again. I don't know why this happens, but it's very frustrating, and we're going to have to just keep using call-out promos. So even though we gained 90,000 fans this week, Shane actually gained 99,000, so we're now about 11,000 down. And honestly, I don't really know how he does it, but fair enough to him. He's absolutely smashing it, so we'll just progress and try to get back into it. So for week number 4, Eric has come into the DMs and asked if he can be in a main event match, so I've gone ahead and put the male tag team titles as the main event. Then I've gone for the female tag team titles as the opener, and then the mid-card is actually seeing Becky versus Bayley in a tables match, just because they've got quite high stamina and I want to keep the ratings up for the shows, so the mid-card matches can't keep being 2 stars. That being said, I have put Dana Brooke and Tegan Knox in another match, so if they can hit the promised land of 2.5 stars, that would be fantastic. Then, like an overly controlling parent trying to force their kid to be friends with someone, I've put Finn in a call-out promo with Drew. Then 2 charity promos because I'm shameless and desperately need the fans. So let's advance and see how week 4 goes. So the opener has Shotzi and Raquel Gonzalez winning the titles off of Io Shirai and Jax in a 3-star match. And I can't believe I'm saying it, but they've done it. A 2.5-star match for Tegan Knox and Dana Brooke, and their rivalry's level 3, so actually they might put on a decent match at WrestleMania Backlash, but I highly doubt it. Okay, I am in danger of the drama curve being skewed here as Becky beats Bayley in a tables match, and it's a 3.5-star fight. That rivalry's level 4, so it's looking red hot going into Backlash. Right, that's actually perfect. Otis and Roderick Strong win the main event in a 4-star match, so the drama curve is actually saved. Obviously, it could have been better with the opening match being 3.5-star or 4-star, but at least now the second mid-card match isn't the best match of the show. So week 4 was actually massive for us, giving us a 6,000 fan advantage over Shane. We actually gained about 20,000 fans over them, but obviously we had the 11,000 fan deficit. But yeah, huge week going into WrestleMania Backlash. Let's build on it and try and stay ahead. So before we go into WrestleMania Backlash, I just wanted to come over to the Power Card section and show you that I still have a Superstars GM and This Is War, and I haven't used them yet. And I will do this at the end of the video, just to prove that I didn't use them once throughout the whole run. But yeah, there they are, sat nicely in the inventory, never to be used. So that's how we've set the card up going into Backlash, with all 4 titles on the line as you'd expect, and then I've put Tegan Knox and Dana Brooke into a tables match in a kind of desperate plea to make their match a little bit better than 2.5 stars. Then we've got an Extreme Rules match for the title as the opener, and a tables match in the main event for the women's title. Now, as you can see in the top right hand corner, we are a little bit strapped for cash, which is why I've changed the promos to be advertising instead of charity, which is probably going to hurt us, but we kind of have to do it. And in the logistics, we've only got the Backlash Arena as the kind of best one we physically can. Then the crew, the special effects, and the advertisement are all lacking behind. But anyway, let's advance into it. Hope it goes well, and we're just going to have to figure out a way to get more cash in the future. So the opening match of the show sees Drew beat Finn in an Extreme Rules match, and it's a 4.5-star classic, so it's a great start. And also, their rivalry's gone up to level 3, so they've still got some unsettled beef. The first mid-card match is actually a shock result as Dana Brooke versus Tegan Knox, and I'm going to say this clearly, Dana Brooke versus Tegan Knox gets a 3.5-star rating. That rivalry is complete, so now I can throw them into the tag team mix and maybe take out Shotzi versus Nia Jax, or Io Shirai versus Raquel Gonzalez as the spare rivalry. The second mid-card match gets a 4-star amazing rating with Io Shirai and Nia Jax coming out as the champions. Unfortunately, the third mid-card match doesn't get quite as good of a rating as the middle match, but it is still 3.5 stars, so not too bad, and that rivalry is complete with Otis and Roderick Strong coming out on top. Thankfully, in the main event, Bayley wins the title in a 4.5-star classic and closes out the show with an absolute banger. So Shane did a pretty good job in his pay-per-view as well, and we've both come out with around 210,000 fans. However, I was about 1,000 fans ahead of him, so we're still in front, but only by 7,000. These next 5 weeks are going to be a slog, but we need to get our booking absolutely spot on. So week number 6 has brought its issues, with Naya only having 30 stamina, so I can't really book her into a tag team match. But also Io Shirai is quite popular, and I want her to fight Bayley for the title going into TLC. But unfortunately, Naya and Io hold the women's tag team titles currently, which makes it extremely difficult for me. So at some point I'm going to have to try and make them drop those titles so Io can be free and fight Bayley, and then I can have the women's titles free to fight with 2 other tag teams. So the show was set to look pretty terrible, but I've just put the title on the line in Finn versus Drew and moved it to the main event because they're on a level 3 rivalry, so hopefully that'll be a good match regardless, and then I've moved the women's title match to the opening fight. So let's advance. Unfortunately, I'm not really expecting much from this show at all, so anything is a positive that we can get over Shane. Well, that's gone way better than I expected it to. Bayley versus Shirai actually picks up a 4-star rating. Bayley holds onto a title, which is absolutely fine, and hopefully that's the start of a brilliant rivalry. Joaquin Wilde picks up the win in the first mid-card match with a 2.5-star rating, even though it was a tables match, and I just can't get these two to progress their rivalry for the life of me. It's getting very frustrating, but we'll just keep going and maybe use a call-out promo next week. Becky versus Raquel does get a 2.5 star as well, but at least it progressed the rivalry, so that one's somewhat promising going into the weeks ahead. The main event gets a 4-star rating as well, with Drew going over and ending the show positively. So here's the post week 6 update. We're still about 6,000 fans ahead. Shane put on a show that gained about 1,000 fans more than us last week, which is annoying, but we're just going to have to keep going and see if we can make that gap that little bit bigger. For week 7, I've put Drew in a tag team with Dexter Lumis because he's currently on a level 4 rivalry with Finn, and I can't really book them against each other for the next 3 weeks, so I need something for him to do. But actually, now I think about it, due to star power and the popularity, I'm actually going to move that match to the main event. Because the other tag team titles are also on the line, with Io and Naya facing Andrea Cannons and Shotzi. Now I'm really hoping that those two can take the titles off of Io and Naya, because I really want that rivalry to progress with Bayley and Io, but I'm not exactly holding my breath. Then the mid-card is Becky versus Raquel and Ivar versus Wilde. I feel like I have to put them in a tables match, otherwise their rivalry is just going to stay on level 1 and keep getting rubbish results. So let's advance to week 7, and hopefully this show will push us a little bit further ahead of Shane. A 2.5 star rating for the opening match, which is kind of understandable seeing as Andrea Cannons' popularity is so low, but it's not a good start, and also Io and Naya still have the titles. Then for some reason Becky versus Raquel gets a 3-star rating, and that's obviously higher than the opener, which is bad for the drama curve, and it doesn't even advance the rivalry, so completely pointless. There are some positives though, as Ivar versus Wilde eventually goes up to level 2, and they actually have a 2.5 star match again, which is not the end of the world seeing as the opening fight was so bad. Then in the main event, Drew actually gets a tag team title to add to his WWE Championship, and it's a 3.5 star match, which is not really great, but to be honest, this show was always going to be pretty terrible. So even though we put on a terrible show, we still managed to gain about 1,000 fans on Shane, which is kind of amazing. And we actually have $100,000 more than him as well, so let's put that to good use and keep increasing the gap. So heading into week 8, I'm trying to manage my stamina as closely as possible, and these guys are the only ones with above 40 that I can really put into a tag match. Drew's popularity after having a tag team title and the WWE Championship is insanely high. So I'm going to try and build on that and see how high I can actually get it in a self-promo. Then I've booked Tegan Knox versus Lula Tandy in a tables match for their first actual fight after their call-out. Then finishing off the show, we've got Ivar versus Joaquin Wilde in a tables match again, and then Bayley versus Io for the title in an Extreme Rules match. As you can see, I've actually got $90,000 spare, so next week I might actually have to sign someone else, but it's nice to have that buffer for once. Anyway, let's get into the show and hopefully secure our position at the top going into TLC. So the first match is a little bit of a dud, with it only getting a 2.5 star rating and Otis and Finn going over. Tegan Knox versus Lula Tandy gets a 2-star rating as well, but their rivalry at least goes up to level 2, so that one's not the end of the world. Finally, we're seeing the benefit of the Wilde versus Ivar match, and it's actually got a 3.5 star rating this time, which I definitely wouldn't have predicted before the show. So obviously in hindsight that should have gone as the opener, but they've been getting 2 to 2.5 star stinkers every single week, so I wasn't really to know. Then the main event gets an amazing 4-star rating, which saves the show with Bayley retaining her title against Io. So that week was actually huge, as we get 31,000 fans more than Shane, so we're now about 41,000 ahead. Heading into week 9, this is looking pretty good, but I don't want to jinx it just yet, so let's just keep booking decent shows and see how it goes. So going into week 9, I'm putting my faith in Wilde and Ivar, as they put on a great match last week, so I'm going to open the show with them in an Extreme Rules match. Then Eric came into the DMs and said that Dexter Lumis was stinking the gaff out and their tag team just wasn't working, so he wanted to prove himself in a singles match, so I've put him up against Roderick Strong, which I think is a decent match. Then Raquel and Becky are continuing their rivalry in the second mid-card match, and that one's just a normal one seeing as they're on level 2. Then I'm once again hoping that Io and Naya drop their tag team titles to Andrea and Shotzi, but again I'm feeling pretty pessimistic. In the promos, we've got Bayley trying to reach a level 4 rivalry with Io just before TLC. Then we've got Tegan Knox calling out Lula Tandy for a level 3 rivalry, and a charity promo from Drew McIntyre himself because he has 91 popularity. We're still managing to keep a decent amount of cash in the bank, but we're probably going to have to sign a new superstar going into the last 5 weeks, so I'm glad we've got that buffer. Anyway, let's click advance and see how this show goes. Wilde and Ivar do not disappoint whatsoever. They put on a 4-star amazing match. Unfortunately for Ivar, it looks like he might have been the issue in the tag team as Roderick Strong wins, but it's actually a 3.5 star match, which is very, very good. Becky beats Raquel in the second mid-card match, and it actually gets a 3-star rating as well, so far so good for the drama curve. And there you have it, a 3.5 star match to end out the show, but unfortunately Io and Naya do retain their titles. Right, so going into TLC, we're about 40,000 fans up still, but I'm a little bit worried because Shane could easily catch up to me after this PPV. So week 10 and the TLC pay-per-view is upon us, and this is how the card is gonna look going into the show. Now we found ourselves with a bit of an issue as Drew currently holds one of the tag titles and Io currently holds one of the tag titles for the women's division. So neither of those belts can actually be put into the show, which is very frustrating, but we're gonna try and get them off of them in the coming weeks. But aside from that, we've got the male and the female titles on the line in the opener and the main event. Then the midcard sees Becky face off against Raquel, and then a new tag team match with Naya and Lula teaming against Shotzi and Tegan. And then finally Ivar versus Wild, which has proven to be one of our best rivalries in the last couple of weeks. So let's advance and hope that Shane doesn't put on a ridiculously good show and overtake us. Okay, that's actually perfect. Finn beats Drew for the men's title, which means that Drew is actually now free to defend the tag team titles. And also, it's a 4.5 star classic, so a lovely start to the show. Becky versus Raquel goes down better than I actually thought it would, and gets a 3.5 star rating, so the show's looking pretty good. However, as expected, this was the match I was very worried about, and it has dropped a stinking 2-star rating. But of course, as we've come to expect now with Wild and Ivar, they've come through with the goods and got a 4-star rating in the third mid-card match. And the main event gets a 4.5 star rating, which is perfect for the drama curve, but unfortunately Io now has the women's title and the women's tag title. So we're going to have to find some way to get that off of her, but we'll deal with that when we get to it. So we got around 167,000 fans from that show, and Shane got 190. He's very much breathing down our necks, so these next few shows need to be good. So just to give you another update after week 10, as you can see, we have still used 0 power cards. Week 11 sees Pete Dunne and John Morrison join the roster to give us a few more options. So immediately I'm putting John Morrison in a tag team with Otis to face off against Drew and Dexter for the titles. Then the midcard sees Tegan Knox and Lula Tandy continue their rivalry, and then Roderick Strong and Eric also doing the same. And the main event is Io and Naya versus Shotzi and Andrea for the women's tag team titles. But actually now I think about it, that's probably better as the opener, as I believe that main event makes more sense. So let's advance and hopefully extend our lead on Shane. Unfortunately, an 18 stamina Io Shirai has somehow managed to retain her tag team title. But anyway, it's a level 2 rivalry now and it's a 3.5 star match, so I can't really complain too much. I accidentally skipped over it, but Tegan Knox versus Lula Tandy was a 2-star anyway, so pretty much not even worth showing. Roderick Strong versus Eric gets a 3-star though, so not all hope is lost for this show. Then finally for the main event, Drew and Dexter get a 3.5 star rating in their match versus Morrison and Otis. So at least we adhered to the drama curve, and actually that rivalry could be very good for WrestleMania. So heading into week 12, we gained an additional 12,000 fans over Shane, which is actually pretty big at this stage. So now we need to make sure that we're building on that even more heading into the last 4 weeks. For week 12, we've got a main event of Finn Balor versus Pete Dunne for the title, and then the opener is going to be a male tag team titles match. Then the midcard is Lula Tandy versus Tegan Knox because they have an insane amount of stamina, so I need to keep fighting them. Then the final match is Naya versus Bayley in a makeshift rivalry to try and pad out the shows. I have stretched my budget a little bit thin, but that's because I bought the big open stadium to try and get some more revenue in ticket sales going into the last few weeks. So let's get into it and hopefully gain some more fans on Shane. Thankfully, Drew didn't get injured in the opening fight, and him and Dexter retain their tag team titles against Otis and Morrison. 3.5 star rating for that one, so not too bad for the start of the show. Lula Tandy and Tegan Knox actually put on a 3-star match. That's exceeded any of my expectations, so this show's already looking really good. Unfortunately, Naya and Bayley have kind of ruined it with a 2-star rating in the second mid-card match, but we'll just have to deal with it. In the main event though, we get a 4-star rating for Finn Balor versus Pete Dunne. So that's great and all, but unfortunately it didn't progress the rivalry, so it's a bit of a double-edged sword. We managed to gain another 4,000 fans on Shane, so if we just keep doing this leading up to WrestleMania, we should be okay. With the key emphasis being on the word should. Week 13's rolled around and we've had to make 2 new signings in Keith Lee and Angel Garza, and I've got to be honest, the show's looking pretty terrible. The only title that we can actually put on the line is the male tag team titles, and as you can see, Drew is suffering. And actually, seeing as he's already on 10 stamina, I might as well make it a tables match to try and make the rating good while I can. So we're just going to have to pray that he doesn't get an injury and that the match gets a decent rating. And then we've also signed Mickie James, who will go into a feud with Io, but obviously she's a face, so we've had to role change her to a heel, and then Io's going to call her out immediately. So with that all explained, let's get into week 13, and hopefully this show isn't as bad as it looks on paper. Lula Tandy and Tegan Knox actually get an amazing rating in their opening fight. These two have done extremely well considering that neither of them were very popular at all when they started this rivalry. Unfortunately, I kind of saw this coming, but Keith Lee vs Wilde only gets a 2-star. And pretty much a carbon copy of the previous match with Angel Garza going off against Ivar also gets a 2-star. So very disappointing, especially as they don't even start a rivalry. Somehow though, Drew doesn't get injured in the main event and pulls off a 4-star rating whilst also retaining the titles. That's pretty heroic if you ask me. Okay, so we're barely scraping along now. We gained around 16,000 fans, which is exactly the same as what Shane gained. So we didn't push the gap between us any further, but at least we didn't lose out. Week 14 is looking suitably terrible as we've had to sign 4 new superstars to fill out a tag team match. So welcome to Raw, I guess, The Miz, Danny Burch, Tyler Bate and Onnie Lorcan. Now none of these people are actually going to fight at WrestleMania, but I desperately need to save stamina on some of my stars. So this show is basically just damage limitation heading into WrestleMania. As long as we don't lose too many fans, I'll be somewhat happy, but yeah, this looks absolutely abysmal. Anyway, let's advance and get this over with. The opening match actually wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, a 2.5-star rating, so that's going to have to do. Garza and Ivar actually get a 3-star match, which is pretty good, but it's not ideal for the drama curve. Bayley beats Nia Jax in the second mid-card match, it's only a 2-star, and she injures her. Not exactly what you want heading into the final week. Thankfully though, Wilde and Keith Lee put on a decent match in the main event and end the show on somewhat of a positive. Somehow we gained 2,000 fans on Shane, so this is really all or nothing now. We need to throw everything we have at WrestleMania to hopefully come out on top at the end of week 15. So WrestleMania is finally upon us and we've got 3 titles on the line due to Io still having the women's tag title. We're starting things off with Io versus Mickie in a Hell in a Cell match for the women's title, then we're going to Lula Tandy versus Tegan Knox in a tables match, with Roderick Strong and Eric facing off in an Extreme Rules match, and then for the final mid-card we have Drew McIntyre and Dexter Lumis versus Otis and John Morrison for the tag team titles. Then the big hitting main event, a level 3, which is kind of disappointing, rivalry between Finn Balor and Pete Dunne in a Hell in a Cell for the WWE Championship. Then we've got every single promo as charity as we desperately try and beat Shane in the last week. So let's advance and hopefully this is enough to win us this run. So opening the show, Mickie James actually dethrones Io and wins the title at WrestleMania in a 4.5-star classic. Tegan and Lula put on another 4-star match and that's a great start to the show. And coming in with another 4-star rating is Roderick Strong versus Eric. Hopefully this show is enough. The male tag team match sees Drew finally get injured in a 4.5-star classic where he retains the title with Dexter. So it's only 4.5 stars, so no legendary ratings whatsoever, but still, hopefully that's enough as we advance and see how Shane does with NXT UK. So as you can see, I beat him in every single match on the night, so hopefully this is enough. I'm going to advance and see if it was. Yes, there we go. So we've actually done it. We've beaten out NXT UK, ranked number 1. It feels very good without using any power cards throughout the entirety of the run. So there's the final scoreboard. As you can see, it was very close. We only beat them by about 42,000 fans, but I'm happy that I've done it because it was a great run and it was a ton of fun. If you want to see more challenges just like this one, make sure to hit that subscribe button and like the video. As always, thank you for watching and we'll see you next time.